Hello, and welcome to another Marketing Sherpa webinar. Today we're going to be talking about social media marketing and how sporting good company Armour Sports utilize Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to connect relevant and engaging content to their fans and followers while they were also driving engagement. So today we are live streaming. So if you want to watch us live, type in the URL marketingsherpa.com/live webinar, and you'll be able to join us in our studio in Jacksonville, Florida. And I believe that is also being tweeted out over #SherpaWebinar. So today we have with us Evin Catlett, the digital marketing manager for Armour Sports. Evin, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
And I am Courtney Eckerly. I'm the manager of editorial content here at Mech Labs, and I am also the reporter on inbound marketing, which is social media content and SEO. Now, Evin, in your role, you lead, manage, and execute holistic digital marketing strategies for the Armour Sports brand portfolio in the Americas. So that includes Salomon, Atomic, and Suunto, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So if you want to ask questions, interact with Evin and I, interact with your fellow attendees, you can do that via Twitter on #SherpaWebinar, and I'll be monitoring for all of those questions or observations, and any that we have time for, I'll ask Evin over the next half hour. We also have relevant content tweeting out over the hashtag, and so there'll be a lot of social media case studies and topics that we've reported on over the past year, and those will be coming out to you over #SherpaWebinar. So Evin, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about Armour Sports?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Armour Sports is a sporting goods company. Armour is the parent company for quite a wide variety of brands, including Wilson, Precor, Mavic Cycling Company. On the outdoor side, we have Salomon, which, for those who aren't familiar, manufactures alpine equipment, skis, boots, bindings. And then there's also quite a large outdoor category of apparel and trail running shoes and hiking shoes and packs. We have Atomic, which is another ski brand. We have Suunto, which is a GPS watch brand, a high-end GPS watch brand. Arc'teryx, and then there are several smaller companies and brands in the action sports category, Bonfire, Nikita, and of course we have Salomon snowboards.
Okay, great. And so let's move on to this particular campaign. Now, we try to include questions that you submitted when you registered for this webinar, and we have one from Steve, who's in marketing communications, and he asked, what have you tried in the past that maybe didn't work? So Evin, if you could just tell us a little bit about the strategies, the social media strategies you've tried in the past and how they led you to this campaign.
Yeah, so this particular campaign focused on Suunto and surrounded a product launch that we had last spring. One of the main challenges with Suunto, it's a Finnish-based watch company, and there's very low awareness in the US. And not only that, but GPS watches tend to have a high price point, and you have competitors like a Garmin who have tons of awareness, not only because their watches are very widely distributed, but also because they have the whole navigation side of things. So there's already a lot more brand affinity. We have, with our core consumers, we have a lot of loyalty, and really once people start using the product, whether they're athletes, avid outdoors people, or just somebody who in their everyday wants to wear a sportier watch, they become very connected with the brand. But getting them to that point was really challenging, and we saw that reflected across our social media channels as well, where we didn't have a ton of reach, and while we did have really strong engagement, it was with very, very small communities on Facebook, and then Twitter was sort of our primary and continues to be a primary customer service channel for us.
Okay, so those were some of your main objectives for this campaign. Did you have any others going into it?
Yeah, I mean, really we wanted to use this as a sort of a test campaign of ways that we could not only engage our end consumers, but also sort of our, it's almost on the B2B side for us, how we could engage shop employees, as well as our athletes across, with Armour Sports, we have the ability to touch much broader audiences when you look at leveraging the brand portfolio as a whole. So how we could tap into the following and communities of our athletes across Solomon and Atomic and Arc'teryx, and really capitalize on that to benefit Suunto, and also test what social channels really resonated the most with our customer base, and where we could essentially get the most return on our investment in terms of engagement and building that community.
Okay, perfect. So, and as we go through, we're going to talk about all the ways that you attempted to and met those objectives. And we had one other question from Karthik, who wanted to know the platforms that you used for this campaign, and there were three, correct?
There were, yes, we used the hub was Facebook. So we used a third-party app tool called OfferPop to build out the actual gallery, which I know you'll see some screenshots of later in the presentation, and the entry platform so we could capture consumer data. And then we also use this as an opportunity to launch Instagram for Suunto in the US and get as much video and photo content as possible. And then we use Twitter as well. So it was, in one sense, our objective was to really, again, test what platform resonated the most with our consumers, but also on the other hand, to really increase engagement across all three.
Okay, great. So let's just do a general overview about the Suunto Ambitions campaign.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, this launched to help promote a product that we launched last spring, which was the Ambit 2S. And the crux of the campaign was that we wanted to inspire people to share their ambitions with us. So through photos and stories, we wanted them to talk about what inspires them, what they're striving for, and really build a community around that. And in addition, we wanted to share the stories of our athletes and the incredible things that they're doing, and use that to help motivate and engage people as well. Obviously, a secondary sort of objective of this was to increase awareness of the new product, and then drive sales not only through our e-com platform, Suunto.com, but also within the dealers that we have all around the country.
Okay, and when people were submitting and entering into this contest, they were entering with their pictures that were then hosted on Facebook in the gallery.
Exactly,
And
yes. Anytime they tagged a photo with the hashtag Suunto across Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, it was automatically funneled into this gallery that lived on Facebook. And so you would also then enter to win the grand prize on Facebook, which was 2,500 in gear of your choice across the brand portfolio that we felt best resonated with this consumer. So that was gear from Arc'teryx, Atomic, Suunto, and Solomon. And then within the campaign, you could then, on the Facebook Hub, you could then look through the gallery of other people's submissions, and we separated out our athlete submissions as well. So participants could very easily see not only what their peers were doing, but also what these people that they sort of aspire to are doing as well, and what their ambitions are.
okay, great. And next, you had a tight timeline for this. You launched your Instagram on May 7th, and then it was over by July 12th.
Yeah, that's
So
correct. And our strategy behind that was really to reduce audience fatigue. I think sometimes you see brands launch campaigns that go on for a very, very, very extended period of time, and you start to lose focus from your audience. So we wanted to make sure that this was in a consumable amount of time. We had weekly winners who won Suunto watches. So that was, we saw that as a way to keep people engaged across the short term, and knowing that it's more than just this grand prize that, they and who knows how other many thousand people have the opportunity to win. But the more entries they have, the more chances they're likely to win the weekly giveaway as well. So that was something to really engage them throughout the duration of the campaign. And then we didn't want the campaign to last too long so that people really sort of lost sight of the outcome.
And we actually had a question on Twitter. Was there a method to decide on a $2,500 prize amount?
Um, that was it was a sort of a budgetary thing, and it was also looking across the sort of the gear that we felt would best resonate with somebody if they were to select sort of a head to toe kit, a jacket and pants and maybe skis and boots, that roughly comes out retail value to about 2,500. So that's where we came up with that number.
Okay, great. And, part of this having such a short timeline is you had to be really organized when you began, right?
That's correct.
So a really important element was to inspire your brand athletes to inspire your followers, right? So you had to be on the same page with everyone involved in making this campaign inspirational.
We did, and I don't know if anybody else out there is working with athletes in their roles, but a lot of our athletes, some have more sophisticated social presence and a strategy behind what they're doing than others, and others really, they're just amazing at what they do, but they don't necessarily have, they're not a business themselves. And so we really needed to make sure that it was very clear to them what we were hoping to get out of their engagement with this campaign, and that it was also really simple for them because this isn't their job, even though some of them are paid, some are just paid in product. They do other things, and they're needing to still accomplish things in their everyday activities. So we wanted to make it easy, but also very clear what the expectation was for the athletes.
And to do that, you set up this packet where you really walked them through every objective and step of the campaign, correct?
That's correct. We had it was just a simple PDF that was sent out to all of the athletes who we tapped to be part of this campaign. In addition to that, they also received the product, so we made sure that they were using the new watch. And then, as I mentioned earlier, was just all about trying to keep it as simple as possible. So 5 steps, exactly what we needed them to do. They saw from the get-go what the app would look like and some examples of what we wanted to get from them. And then throughout the couple of months that the campaign was running, we would send out weekly reminders, just asking them, or those who maybe weren't as active, just reminding them what the expectation was and asking them to contribute a little bit more. But for the most part, we found that sending this out at the beginning, I think, was really, really helpful for them to be able to just digest exactly what they were being asked to do and put them on task, which made it much easier.
And I assume putting this together was not as much work as, dealing with athletes individually, and it probably answered a lot of questions at the beginning, and the payoff was worth the time put into it.
Absolutely.
And another element of this campaign that we talked about a little before was that you launched the Armour Sports in the Sunto US Instagram account for this campaign.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So what went into deciding to use Instagram and setting it up, and what were your expectations for the platform?
So part of what we love about Instagram and that we've seen with other brands is that it really turns everyone into a photographer, whether that's by just adding lots of filters or just by encouraging people to share video content. And one of the things that you see across, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Twitter, is photos and videos make people want to engage more. I mean, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but there are plenty of studies you can pull up that show how much higher engagement rates are on Facebook when brands post photo or video content as opposed to just text. And in addition to that, it of course affects your EdgeRank score through Facebook, meaning that your content is going to be served up to more of your fans. So part of our strategy behind launching Instagram and really wanting the main content focus of this campaign to be on Instagram was to get that photo and video content that we could then turn around and share across our other channels, knowing that the engagement rate was going to be a lot higher, knowing that the quality of the photography that we would get would be much better. And sort of a tertiary element to it was the ability to then use that photo content and repurpose it down the road. So I know there's some slides later on, but we had the opportunity to use some of the user submitted content for trade events. It's going to be worked into some of our catalogs and other promotional materials. And I think even more so than that, us having the ability to repurpose this user generated content across our own social channels just gets people excited. Everybody has this desire to be famous to some respect. So if you're looking, if you're a consumer and the brand that you're following and engaging with then shares a photo that you submitted, that makes you feel so good, and that connects you to the brand in such a stronger way than simply commenting or tweeting or however else you would engage with that brand. So it allows us to then, we feel, create much stronger brand loyalists who are going to be more likely to purchase and recommend our product down the road.
And on top of that, you're having your consumers show other consumers uh, all of the ways that they can use your product without you having to sit down and figure out a way to convey that.
Absolutely. I mean, when you see that Sunto Ambitions hashtag, you may have no idea what Sunto is, but when you click it and you see all of the other content that's tagged with that hashtag, and it's all this really inspirational and aspirational and beautiful photography, as a consumer, you're immediately intrigued, and we hope and we saw that it then drove people not only to our website, but also to follow us across our three primary social channels.
And before we move on, we had a question from Jean, and she asked, would you be willing to share your terms and conditions? So were there maybe some highlights or some things that you put in there that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, one of the things that we did build into the terms and conditions was exactly what I was talking about before, that the brand reserves the ability to repurpose and use the content that the user submitted, which we think is very important, and it's something we make sure is always in terms and conditions of any contests or giveaways we run, just because you never know what type of content you're going to get. And one of the things we saw is that not only was the amateur photography that was submitted beautiful and stunning, but we also had a lot of really well-known photographers who started participating in the campaign who have 25,000 Instagram followers, and the reach we get with that and the ability to repurpose that content becomes really important to us as a brand. So I would say that that's the one thing that we always make sure is in our terms and conditions is the ability to then use the submitted content.
Okay, great. And all of those were being collected via the hashtag onto your hub, which was Facebook. So
Yep.
we had a question here from Sammy, who's a digital marketing coordinator. How do you how do you keep Facebook engagement steady, but also keep it relevant? So in your experience, what's the difference between content on Facebook versus the other two platforms?
So as I mentioned at the beginning, we found that users and our followers tend to view the brand presence on Twitter as a great place to ask questions. So more than any of our other channels, that's really, not that it's strictly a customer service platform, but that's really where people go to ask technical questions, discuss warranty issues, anything like that. At the same time, it is also a good place for us to engage with our athletes who are often very active on Twitter, and with consumers who are talking about the brand or relevant categories or events we're part of. But we do see that really as more of a, it's a conversation place, and it's a place that we hope people know that they can ask questions to our brands. Instagram is really all about inspiration for us. So we want to use that platform to share incredible photos, to help reinforce the brand origins, whether it's Sunto or whether it's our other brands, but to make sure that people know, and feel the emotion behind the brands. And Facebook is almost a combination of all of those. We've definitely found that the best content that we can put out there on Facebook that gets the most engagement is photos and videos that get people excited and that make them want to, that have some sort of a call to action. It makes them want to comment or like or share the content that we're putting out there. And so what we typically do on Facebook is develop communication calendars that have very specific content buckets, whether that's, an athlete news, whether it's sharing something about a contest, user submitted content, whatever it is, we try to fill those buckets. And then it's also very easy to measure what's resonating the most and adjust your strategy as a result. So if we see that, people are engaging more with user submitted content versus product photos, or with our athlete videos versus something else, we can start to tweak our strategy very quickly and make sure that what we're saying and how we're saying it is the most successful. And one of the things we found with this campaign is that people really did love seeing what others were submitting. So even though we had slated into our content calendar on Facebook, the promoted posts that talked specifically to the contest, it was also very important for us to share those user submitted photos and incorporate those into the way we were promoting the contest and increasing our reach. And through partners like you see on this slide, Women's Adventure, who are help promoting on our behalf. Again, it's for us, it's really all about monitoring and sort of staying on your toes and being able to adjust your strategy quickly depending on what is driving the most engagement and reach.
Okay, great. So we did have a question from Monica, who's a project coordinator, and she wanted to know what type of messages Facebook users want, which I think you've definitely addressed. But I think an important thing to point out, which is what you just said, is you it's a it's listening. Social media is a conversation, and so you can build a strategy at the beginning, but it's really about about nimble marketing and being
Correct.
able to respond pretty quickly. So with that being said, let's move on to Twitter. And talk a little bit about your strategy on Twitter, and which I'm assuming is very visual.
It was, yeah. Part of what we were looking to do on Twitter, and to be honest, we saw the least activity on Twitter of all three platforms with this particular campaign. But it is a very active platform for our athletes because it's so easy to use and they can really quickly, type a message into their phone, and it's a simple way for them to engage with their followers without having to manage a page or keep up in their with Instagram comments. It's also a lot more one-to-one at times when you're having conversations with people. So, we really looked at that as Twitter as a way to motivate the sort of more select group of users who was engaging with the campaign on Twitter. And you can see some examples here of how we were continuing to make sure we were retweeting content and motivating people.
Okay, great. And we had a question from GoToWebinar from Richard. So were there any risks when you were starting this campaign? Did you look at each of these platforms and maybe come up with a strategy for anything that went wrong ahead of time? Think of anything that was maybe a risk going in that you were aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any hashtag campaign you run, there's always the risk that you hear those horror stories of McDonald's running that hashtag campaign that really goes in a negative direction and people take it away, or that your hashtag is being used of and or used in a different way. So with anything we do, we try to make sure that it's a unique hashtag so that there isn't the risk that it's being used whether in another country or in the US as in a meaning something different. I think we always go into it with a plan in mind of how we're going to address any negativity. And we have our PR team and our team in-house who are prepared to deal with that. But for this particular campaign, just because the message was such a positive message. We didn't anticipate that there would be, there was significant risk on any of the platforms.
Yeah, I think that McDonald's, Forbes reported on it, and the title of their article was "When a Hashtag Becomes a Bashtag," which
Yeah.
keeps marketers up at night. So you showcased your weekly winners. What was your main objective in doing that?
So part of that again was making sure that all of the users felt like um, it wasn't this huge, long, drawn out time frame between the start of the campaign when they first started hearing about it from us and then the end. We wanted these, weekly opportunities to continue motivating and encouraging people, which is part of why we opted to promote and tell this and share the stories of the weekly winners. It gave us more conversations to be had, rather than us just sort of spitting out the, share your ambitions and win, share your ambitions and win. It gave us the chance to tell more stories. And in addition to that, it gave these weekly winners then the ability, and they wanted to tell their fan base and their communities how excited they were to have won. So it really just increased the overall reach of the campaign, increased the positive feedback we were getting, and gave us a much broader opportunity to push and engage the campaign in a more organic way than constantly just telling people to enter.
Exactly. And alongside all of this, you were supporting the campaign with social advertising. Uh, so how were you testing? What were you doing with this? What was your overall takeaway from your social advertising efforts?
Yeah, so we had a fairly healthy advertising budget for this campaign. We primarily spent that on Facebook, between sponsored stories and promoted posts. But we did do a very small test on Twitter, since we hadn't done any advertising for Stunto there, just to see the sort of reach we would have, and knowing that we had the ability to target users with predefined interests was something that was important to us, because the product we were launching is a multi-sport product. So we wanted to hit the runners, the bikers, and the swimmers, and make sure they knew this product was out there, and start to engage with the brand through the avenue of this campaign. So as you can see here, some of the stats with our really small Twitter test, it was successful in the sense that it did have a higher click-through rate at a much lower cost. We had 875 clicks with the budget that we spent. However, what we did find is that Facebook did prove to be much more impactful in terms of driving actual engagement. And so for the majority of the campaign, our efforts were really focused around promoted posts. And I'm sure most people on this webinar are familiar with Facebook's new algorithm, and how really the amount of people who your content is being served to is going down fairly significantly, unless you are paying. And we certainly saw that our reach with this campaign would not have been nearly to the extent that it was had we not invested in Facebook advertising.
Great. And one of the best results of this campaign was that you got a lot of amazing user-generated content. We talked about, and we saw a lot of the pictures you were getting. So just quickly, how have you been able to use it, and do you have any plans for it in the future?
Yeah, so this image shows how we were able to repurpose the user-submitted content in our trade show booth at Outdoor Retailer, which is a big industry trade show that happens twice a year. We really felt like it, not only was it, did it make the booth more interesting, but for the buyers that were coming around, it really helped us showcase as a brand how we're continuing to touch the end consumer, and how we're getting them, excited and engaged with the brand, with the idea being that they'll then go into a specialty outdoor store, or an REI or whatever it is, and ask for this product because they're familiar with it, and they're excited about what the brand offers. So in addition to this, I mentioned we are incorporating some of the user submitted images into catalogs and emails and things like that.
And some of the results you were able to get, would you say that what had the most impact on your team, or was maybe the most surprising result that you were able to get from this campaign?
So for us, it was definitely certainly the reach. I mean, that's a huge increase in the daily reach we had with our Facebook posts. But another one that was very impactful to us was the people talking about this. We had a 60% increase in the number of people talking about and engaging with Sunto on Facebook, and that for us was huge. It's had a ripple effect in terms of the engagement rates and reach that all of our posts have, even since we stopped advertising. And I think that that is probably one of the biggest successes from the campaign.
And we have your top takeaways here. Play in multiple spaces. We saw that with the three platforms you were on. Leverage content from multiple sources. So you were drawing from basically from every company's strength that you had, your athletes and your consumers, and you have support via social advertising is critical, which we talked about with your social buys. And that is our 30 minutes. Evin, thank you so much again for joining us and sharing your story. I hope that other marketers listening today can garner some of the same great results that you got.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
And thank you all for joining us. Be sure to take the survey below and share your thoughts and feedback so we can stay on point with your needs. And you can go to slideshare.net/marketing Sherpa to view all of the slides from today's webinar. Thank you again so much for joining us.